Greetings and welcome to the podcast of Church and State, where we investigate people, their beliefs, and how it impacts their politics. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply of those of the people talking. They are not affiliated with any organization or group. We invite you to listen, to ask questions, and comment down below about any topics you would like us to cover. Thanks for listening. All right, everyone. So welcome back. This is episode 4 of the podcast of Church and State. And we concluded last podcast with basically almost a plea, really, of saying, let's step back. Let's stop with the escalation of hostility, violence, crime, and, you know, whether you're taking someone legally to court for a difference of, you know, political opinions, or like we've witnessed violence. Let's stop and let's rethink about that course of action, because as my dad put it, if you follow that, we use this phrase a lot when he and I are talking, to its logical conclusion, it's a dangerous place. And I don't think anyone wants to experience the logical conclusion to that course of action. Okay.
Right. I don't think as a society we're really ready to go to that point of carrying this hostility to its logical conclusion.
Because there's no way that you can have a polite society, civil society, any of that, if that's how people interact with one another. And you can look through history and see how different countries have dealt with that level of hostility and dissension, really. Yeah. So the next thing that we have to figure out, in my mind, is we got to come back to the tape. We have to bring back civility. Charlie Kirk, although
a very controversial,
he's controversial. I mean, I like Charlie
subject,
Kirk.
Right?
I mean, I'll be honest. I like Charlie Kirk. I think he was very good for what he was doing and for the country, but he is controversial. But the one thing that he said, and I don't think anyone would disagree with this fact, is the minute we stop talking to each other, that's when violence occurs, right? When I no longer want to hear your opinions or consider your opinions, and I cannot talk to you civilly, that's when issues happen.
Right, and we have to look at it not only as when people stop talking, because a lot of times yelling and screaming is considered talking in our culture today. It has to come back to an area where ideas can be voiced.
Yes. And name calling. I mean, it's name calling, it's yelling, screaming, it's...
Yeah, I think we were talking about C.S. Lewis. You know, he made a statement about words. When we redefine words, the words lose meaning.
Yes.
We are a very fortunate society. We've got millions of words out there. So why do we need to apprehend or hijack existing words and apply new meanings to them? We're far beyond that as a culture. We understand how to create words and how to create new meanings for words. Or if we come up with a new situation, let's come up with a word to define that. But what we find ourselves in our position in society today is we're hijacking old words, applying new meanings to them, and then shouting them at people, and it's confusing because you have these people don't understand what you're saying. I mean, if you take a word and you apply 14 different meanings to it, and you put that out there in a group and you yell that word out, you're going to have 14 different reactions to it.
Correct.
At least 14 different reactions to it, because it's got 14 different meanings, and each person has a different meaning for that.
Correct.
Right? If we, I mean, just think about it in very simplistic terms. If we took the word fire, right, and we started, you know, applying not only, you know, a burning building, but, you know, maybe a waterfall, or, you know, maybe a kid's slide, and we said, oh, all of these things are now termed a fire. Right? I go into a crowded movie theater and I yell fire, and no one knows what I'm talking about. They may think, oh, this is a kids zoo, or hey, maybe we've got a water park, or maybe the building's burning down, but we have no idea because we've applied all of these new meanings to the same word. We see that in terms of, terms like Nazis and fascists and all of these terms, right? I mean, to bring it down to the reality of where we're at today, right? Let's not talk around the elephant in the room,
right?
But we've applied so many different meanings to the word fascist, and so many different meanings to the word Nazi, and so many different meanings to the word racist, and so many different meanings to all of these words that they have become flashpoints in our society.
Yes,
and we refuse to actually. Unfortunately, the people are afraid, I think, in many instances, or ignorant. I would prefer to say afraid than ignorant, but they're afraid to actually vocalize the meaning behind the word. It's much easier just to throw the word out there,
correct,
and maybe it'll stick to the wall.
Well, I think
it'll evoke a reaction.
Right, and I think it's a mixture of fear, and I think it's also a mixture of... and I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, but laziness. Okay, I mean, it's hard to have a good vocabulary. It's hard to dig into the reasons that words have this meaning or that meaning. I mean, let's say pre-1935, Nazi wasn't really a big thing, right? And it was only until after that we saw the conclusion of the Nazi Party that we were like, oh, that's not a good thing. That was really, really bad, right? And so it takes time, though, to read through history or to pick up a dictionary or look it up or understand it and do a deeper dive than, a quick Google search. And then 5 seconds later, I feel like I'm, an expert because I read, a couple sentences on this concept. So I think it has, and I hate to put it that way, I think it's a mixture of, like you said, fear and also not putting in the work, right? It's easy not to... want to understand what the other side is saying.
And you could devolve that into our listen to the language of the day. And we have, like I said, we have such a colorful vocabulary of words that we could use, but most of the conversation revolves around 4-letter words, right?
Yes.
And the word like has supplanted most of the vocabulary that isn't 4-letter, what we used to call foul language, right?
Right.
I mean, we use the 4-letter words to describe everything from ice cream to, how a car looks.
Right.
And we've lost the ability to communicate because if you were to actually listen to people, what they say, you could never decipher most of the conversations.
Gosh, no.
And it's sad, right? But it's what you go back to. It's a form of laziness. We functionally don't want to take time to know the words, and then we don't want to take the energy to use them.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, just this past week, I was talking to somebody and they used a big word and I had never heard it. But the nice thing about the word, and sadly I can't even remember what it is this week, but last week when they used it, it perfectly fit into what we were talking about. And I was reminded that vocabulary is very, very important. Yeah. So talking about coming to terms and coming to understanding, which communication has the ability to do, right? So we got to go back to civil conversation, which requires really good conversation skills. It requires diving into vocabulary, diving into history, literature, and the like. So let's come back to a civil stage and let's start talking. Let's start unraveling this tangled mess that has become this separation of church and state concept.
And I think, as you stated earlier, that comes back to finding that common ground.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So we have to, and that's I think what we start out. So I'm going to read. I'll hold off on that for a couple minutes. But finding that common ground, if you do a study, whether you're an atheist, you believe in humanism, relativism, Christianity, you're Muslim, Hindu, etc., fundamentally we all believe in some type of right and wrong. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that, and I would encourage them to go get on a flight and get delayed at a large hub, be it Dallas, Chicago, or anywhere, And when you get delayed or your flight gets canceled, inherently the customer service line at that airport grows exponentially. And what I find amazing is all of those people, regardless of religion or socioeconomic background, they are all standing in that line, unified under the cause that they bought a ticket, they spent their money, and the airlines did not deliver on their promise of getting them where they said that they would take them, right? And there's no communication. There's no, it's just a mutual understanding, a unifying, and everyone in line that I talked to, if I asked them and polled them, and I have seen customer service lines, I kid you not, probably an eighth mile long or longer, especially on those days when travel's really bad. And I bet if I polled everyone and said, hey, do you think what has happened is right? That American Airlines or United or whichever airline is your favorite didn't get you to your destination, there'd be a resounding no, right? This is unfair. It's not right. And I say that to say, regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of religion, regardless of culture, because in that line, regardless of politics, because everyone travels, right? Everyone flies. So regardless of culture, religion, politics, so on and so forth, there is a unifying call that said, hey, the airlines did wrong here and they deserve to pay up, right?
And if the airline came out and said, hey, we're morally relativistic, we don't care that we sold you a ticket and didn't take you anywhere, people would be lined up in the courts to force them to follow through on their commitment. So like you're saying, we fundamentally believe that if you make a commitment, you should follow through on it.
Yes.
That is a tenet that we all agree. We can all demonstrate that. We may vocalize that we don't agree with that.
Correct.
But when push comes to shove, like you said, and you're standing in the airline customer service line, you're wanting some type of satisfaction.
Yes.
And not only are we wanting the airline to follow through on getting us to our destination, but if they're going to delay us for 4 hours, we want a meal chip.
That's right.
You know what? And if they're going to delay us overnight, we want a free motel room.
Yes.
So not only do we want them to follow through on their commitment to get us to point A from point A to point B, but we feel that it is right and correct or fair for them to compensate us for the inconveniences. Everybody wants that. You stand in line and you listen to the customer. You listen to the people on the not on the customer service side of the counter. Right. You listen to the people on the other side, and they're going, "Well, no, aren't you going to put me up for the night?"
Yep.
And the airline will go, "I'm sorry, this is weather related. We don't pay for rooms during a weather delay." Well, that's not right.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, and what's funny is because I've sat through a lot of those lines, and that's exactly what they say. They either say it's not fair, it's not right. Let me talk to your manager because this can't possibly be the solution, right?
Right.
So they fundamentally, and again, it does not matter what their background is. That is a universally unifying, call, if you want to call it, or chant on traveling individuals, right? And they want fairness, they want to be treated well, and they want good customer service, right? And so now, as we start just using that simplistic example, we've already identified none of us like to get lied to, right? We believe that people should honor their commitments. We believe that really you should stand for something, right? We don't like someone to be wishy-washy or two-faced. I even did a search on this, and still up to 90% of the U.S. believe it's wrong to murder somebody, right? Just flat out, just murder someone.
Yeah, we're not talking about the political bomb of abortion or
capital
euthanasia,
punishment
capital punishment, right? We're just talking about the general 90%, 95% time of life.
Yes.
When people are walking down the street, they're between some age 2 and 50, or and just some random person walks up and knocks them off, right? We all agree that that's a wrong thing.
We exactly. So there is a resounding conclusion as far as that goes, that this is a wrong action to do.
And going back to your line, we didn't exactly talk about that in terms of the airlines, but you mentioned it later. None of us want to be lied to, right? You go down to your stockbroker down there. He sells you 50 shares of the up and coming new company, and then tomorrow he goes, "Oh, by the way, all that money that you gave me, that company doesn't exist."
Right.
We would be. again, we would all be incensed and we'd be lined up for that class action lawsuit because this guy, lied to us and presented a company as something that didn't exist.
And same as identity theft.
Right.
I mean, that's why identity theft is such a horrible act. It's just like that. You've been lied to, you've been scammed, and everyone hates that. I don't know of anyone that's like, oh, hey, I got scammed today, and I'm really happy about it.
No, absolutely.
You know?
Right? Hey, guess what? I took all my life savings and gave it to somebody on the phone, and I am so happy.
I'm so happy,
now.
right?
We don't see that.
There's no one ever that I know of, and regardless of political, regardless of religious, regardless of social standing, no one comes forward and says, hey, I love getting lied to. That's my favorite thing.
Right. So there are a lot of common ground that we have that are independent of what you just mentioned, our socioeconomic status in life, our political bent in life, our religious convictions or non-religious convictions. Put all of those aside, and guess what? We have a whole host of things that we as a people can agree on.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think it's just, and sadly, and I don't know how to do this exactly, but if you just cut off, if I just blindfolded someone from their senses and everything else, and I just made statements that they could just look at, I believe that we would all agree on some of like the statements that we just made, right? It's unfair to lie to somebody. It's not fair to not honor your commitment, so on and so forth. I want to read an excerpt from C.S. Lewis. This is from his book, Mere Christianity, on this topic. And essentially what I think we've been doing by talking about that common ground, we call it a common ground. C.S. Lewis called it the laws of nature. And I'm going to read a little bit because he does the same type of fleshing out of the idea, but I like how he says this. There are many objections to the notion of a universal law of nature. One objection is the idea that throughout history, human beings have believed in many different moralities, but this isn't true. It's striking how similar different civilization moral codes are. It's almost impossible to imagine a country in which people are praised for fleeing battle or lying to their loved ones. There are many superficial differences between moral codes, but deep down, they are more or less the same. Many people say they don't believe in a, quote, real right and wrong. These people insist that right and wrong are just myths that people have invented. But even people of this kind behave as if they do believe in a universal right and wrong. When they feel like they've been wronged, they say that's not fair, implying that there must be some objective standard of fairness. So in short, regardless of religion or socioeconomic background, politics, we have that common ground.
Right. And it's for us, or at least I agree with what you're saying. And so I think the challenge for us as we're going through this podcast is to think is to encourage any listeners that we have out there to say, engage.
Yes.
With your neighbors. Engage with those who might have a different position than you, but do it from the position of, first of all, finding the common ground.
Yes.
If you start a conversation with your neighbor on uncommon ground, it's going to end in an argument.
Yes.
But if you find the common ground that they have, that you might have with them, and you start from there, you're going to have a much more impactful conversation with them than if you start from a point of disagreement.
Agreed. Thanks for listening to the podcast of Church and State, hosted by Jared and John. At the core, we hope that we've said something today that simply made you think and expand your horizons. Make sure to comment down below of things you want to hear or topics you want covered. We'll see you on the next one.